Good Monday morning. Only 2 weeks to go. Number 1 week till Christmas, but 2 weeks till we're done with Monday Musings for the year. And this is the moment where we have been waiting to see Joseph and his brothers reconnect. And it happens in Genesis 42. The famine has come, and the one that Pharaoh dreamed about, the one that Joseph has intentionally, strategically, wisely prepared for, the one that God positioned him to be the man for this moment because God knew what was needed that Joseph would have never been able to know. And the famine is felt so far-reaching that Joseph's family in Israel is feeling it as well. See, Joseph's in Egypt, his family's still in Israel. And so Jacob sends Joseph's brothers to Egypt. He says, there's food there. I want you to go. But he will not let them take Benjamin, who is Joseph's baby brother. Why? Because last time he sent a boy out, he came up missing. Okay? So Jacob's learned a thing or two as well. He doesn't send Benjamin with them. And this is where the story comes together in Genesis 42:6. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Remember a dream like this? All the way back in the beginning of Joseph's story. I dreamed that I was a sheaf that stood above the rest, and all your sheaves bowed down to me. Here is the culmination of Joseph's dream. The dream that he foolishly shared ended up being the very thing that got him where he is today, to create the moment that the dream was about. Oh, sit in that for a minute. Even our moments of foolishness, God can work out for the redemption of such a larger story. Friends, only God can do that. Only God can do that. Stay focused, Denise. You talked too long the other day. So, Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them. So he immediately recognizes them, but he treats them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. Where do you come from, he said. They said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of. And he said to them, you're spies. You've come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said to him, no, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. Now do you remember why it was so important that we knew what we knew about Joseph last week? Is that right? That we learned what we learned, and we now know what we know about Joseph from last week? That he was finally at a place where he no longer demanded retribution for what he had been through. That he had forgotten and been able to forgive to such a degree that now in this moment, when he could get even, and don't think that he's talking roughly because he's angry. He's not. There's a strategy behind everything that he's doing. And God knew. Friends, these are making up the 12 tribes of Israel. Remember all the way back to when God told Abraham, look up at those stars. Your generations will be more than the stars of the heaven. Look at the sand. Your inheritance, your descendants will be more than the sand on the seashore. That's all coming from these 12 boys of Jacob. And like John Bevere says in his book, The Bait of Satan, if Joseph had not gotten over and been removed from bitterness and anger, he would have destroyed 10 of the 12 tribes. So God had to know that there was no longer the desire to vindicate in Joseph's heart. He had to know this. And sometimes God will not allow our vindication to come until he knows that we won't try to carry out our vindication ourselves. You may just want to sit in that one for a minute. Sometimes God will not allow our vindication to come until he knows we will no longer try to carry out our vindication ourselves. Now, Joseph doesn't trust them, so he tests them. Now, you need to realize forgiveness doesn't mean you're foolish. Just because you forgive, like my friend Packer says, doesn't mean you throw your brains over the fence. You keep your wits about you. When you forgive somebody that's violated trust, you don't just recklessly give them your trust back. And so Joseph is testing them. Why? Because he wants to know where Benjamin is. He wants to know if Benjamin's alive. So he tells them, I'm going to hold Simeon captive while you go and prove to me your baby brother's still alive. So Genesis 42:21 says this, Then they said to one another, In truth, we're guilty concerning our brother Joseph, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us and we did not listen. Do you remember, we never heard about the begging. We do now. When they sold Joseph to that band of Ishmaelites, he was begging them not to do it, and now they're remembering. That is why this distress has come upon us. So now they're paralleling what they're walking through as a byproduct, a consequence of what they've done to their brother. Good for them. I'm glad they've remembered. And Reuben answered them, Did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen to me. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. But then he turned away from them and wept. He knew everything they were saying, and they had no idea. And what does he do? He weeps. Do you know, I remember another passage of scripture in a story about a man named Lazarus who died, who was a friend of Jesus's. And when Jesus got there and saw the pain of Mary and Martha, and when he knows what death is going to swallow up, he weeps. Remember, Joseph is a foreshadowing of Jesus. Jesus' love that loves us in all our screwed upness. That when we should be gotten even with, instead we receive manifold, unmerited grace. Joseph weeps because he's waited 22 years to hear these words from his brother's mouth. And when they do, he doesn't get even. He doesn't plan their demise. Instead, he weeps. Yeah, just like Jesus does for us.